You also have that dynamic where people marry,
but
and
my
then,
friend,
because without birthright, then Kenya has another dynamic.
Northeastern border. That's a different story.
Yeah, because
lakini border ya Northeastern sio refu kuliko hizi zingine.
It doesn't matter.
But the whole point of it is that kuna Msomali anakuja kutoka Somali.
Yes. Whatever the narrative is.
And then now anachukua citizenship.
Wanasema analipa.
Yes, either that or they are proving or
whatever. That's the narrative.
That's the narrative.
No, and then there's
wanalipa.
There's also another issue.
There's a narrative over there that
there's also another.
They're coming back and forth, and you can't prove who's who.
Let me throw a spanner in the works. So it seems like a good thing, but now the timing. This is why now it has raised a furor. Because it's being done for political reasons. Kuna huyu jamaa amepoteza kura za Central Kenya.
We're not denying.
There's
kuna hiyo timing.
Yeah, there's that timing, but also in as much as that timing, but then also I think it gives an opening to have a serious discussion on the neglect of our brothers and sisters, what we go through, because like you said, kuna watu wengi walienda they applied, they got their father ID, their birth certificate, and they got ID. There are guys who got their IDs when they are 30 and Somalis. But anyway,
some people still don't have it because they can't get it.
Yeah, they can't get it.
You can't go get nyanya na babu.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you then have this mass displacement, mini wars that happened in the 1950s, 60s of Tutsis specifically being targeted by the governments in their communities. It culminated in 1994 when you had this seminal event that shocked the whole world. You know, there was 3 months of mayhem when a genocide happened and 1 million people were killed. At a pace recorded nowhere else in human history. And mostly by brute force, by
manual. Yeah, it wasn't guns.
Yeah, it was very well organized. Bullets. And unfortunately, Rwanda has a nyumba kumi. In fact, that's where this system of nyumba kumi came from. So the local umudugudu, they call him, knows where everybody is from, who married who, and that is who had the records.
The list.
Yes. Of who they want
class
to.
Prefect.
That's who they want to eliminate.
Yes, nenda he has a list.
Yeah. So then comes
ukienda kwa kuna OneMic uende kwa hii nyumba pale hawa ndio watu nataka. Ni hawa.
Si hata hapa DMV tuko na jamii. Na jamii ni nyumba 10. So the nyumba 10 chair knows everybody. Where you're from. And if you've been living in that community for many years, they know everything about your background, who is your mother, who is...
Right.
So then the killings started.
Correct.
It was very systematic, very well organized. It was a well-oiled machine. And they butchered the Tutsi population at record numbers, at record speed. And obviously it was based on this long-standing resentment. We can talk about like the reasons, but it's a long story.
Yes.
So this continues for 3 months, and then a former intelligence officer by the name of Kagame, at the time, he was the head of intelligence in the Ugandan army. So, by the way, in fact, Kagame, his wife was even in Kenya. A lot of Rwandans found refuge in different cities.
Oh yeah, I remember that time because nilikuwa nafanya français.
Walikuwa wengi.
Alliance français.
Parlez
français. J'étais là-bas Alliance français avec mes amis. Pierre Kadukulu. Pierre Sedou. And we had some
a lot of instructors.
Not even that, like students, like some of the students.
I remember my French teacher was from Rwanda.
Yeah,
in high school.
There was this young hot from Rwanda, but like she was coming to
Français.
Oui. Pepe Le Pew.
You could have just
continue.
So the Rwandans in the who are by this time refugees mostly in the countries around the north, Kenya, in Uganda, in Tanzania, there's a lot of Rwandans who now fled.
Rwandese.
Yes. Tutsi, specifically Tutsi, who fled the country.
Correct.
Right? Because obviously, I mean, you've just witnessed a lot of horror. Entire families were being wiped out.
Yes.
So, Arang Tagami is formed. Kagame was at the no. In fact, he was not at the helm. He was the head of intelligence also in that army. By the way, this guy called Museveni, he's a Muhima, and Muhima, Bahima, are part of the Banyankole.
They are Rwandese.
They are not Rwandese. They are not Rwandese.
They're the Ugandan.
No, they are not. They are a cousin tribe.
Okay.
So it's when we think of Masai and Samburu, Kuyus and Merus.
Meru. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So Bahima, I think even their language is mutually intelligible, but they are not Batutsi.
Not
they
quite.
They are ethnically related. Yes. So they had a lot of support also from the Ugandan side. So they charge into. They were literally racing against time to stop the genocide.
Mayhem,
heading towards Kigali. And after a few engagements, they made it to the capital and they took power. So then fast forward, between 1994 and the 2000s, these former genocidaires, they call them Interahamwe. They scattered. Of course, these people scattered in Interahamwe. It's pronounced Interahamwe. No, I've heard it being pronounced in Terra. Interahamwe. These people scatter into the diaspora. Now it's reversed. Most of them go to Congo. Many go to allies, French allies who are supporting them. So many went to Belgium. Some came even to the US. You remember the story with this guy called Rusesabagina. We will get to that later. But a lot of them went into the diaspora. Yeah, and the leaders, sort of some of them vanished into the woodwork. In fact, one was reported to have hidden in Kenya for many years. It was a big source of contention. So basically, the way they resolved the whole conflict around the genocide was they set up Gachasha courts, local courts, where the perpetrators were forgiven. Some of them were jailed, and then the ones who were the planners, those ones were tried in criminal courts around the world. Some of them in the ICC and other places. But the result of that is that the switch was flipped. So now the Interahamwe were on the run, and the RPF took power under Kagame and is held power until to date. What subsequently happened, which is now where we are today, is the Interahamwe, when they went to Congo, they regrouped and formed the
M23.
Not M23. They formed what is it called? FARC.
Okay.
Yes. So they formed a variety of militias. So they were part of, they formed, they supported a variety of militia groups within, particularly in North and South Kivu. On our map there, those border county provinces. North Kivu and South Kivu exactly border Rwanda and Burundi. On one side of Lake Kivu is South Kivu, on the other side is North Kivu. On the other side of the border, you have Rwanda and Burundi on the other side, which is predominantly a region that's populated by ethnic Tutsis. And these guys have been in those regions from time immemorial. In any recorded history, but Tutsi have been in that region of the world since the 11th century. There's recorded history of evidence that has been found that these people are ethnic or indigenous to those regions. But now you have this enemy force that has come in. And what do they start doing? They continue pushing that agenda to eliminate the Tutsi. And obviously, politically, what it did, it sort of, already there was tension, because in Africa, around the entire continent, you have interethnic conflict. If you go to northern Kenya, it's Turkanas with Toposas on this side and Karamojas on the other side. Turkanas fighting with Merus over water. You have Somalis fighting over the border. So already those conflicts were there between the Batutsi and other ethnic communities, because they would say, because you are Tutsi and Rwandan speaking, it's like the Maasais are being told, you are Kenyans, go back. Right? Tanzanian Maasais being told you are Kenyans. If in Kenya we started saying Abasamia are not Kenyans, they need to go back over the border. You see, this border started playing this mind game on the population. So they are the ethnic communities around them had already got these historic grievances because they are pastoralists. So there's also obviously conflicts over water, conflicts over land, but it was inflamed further by now the presence of this Interahamwe, who now formed these militias. Unfortunately, the Congolese government then looks at this situation, and with all their biases, instead of working towards integrating their local Tutsi population, they start working with the Interahamwe, former Interahamwe, and their associated groups.
By local Tutsi population, you mean people who...
Banyamulenge. Now the Banyamulenge.
Those
The ones who are Apo Kivu.
the original. The originals.
Yeah, the indigenous.
Siwa Rwanda.
No.
Yeah, but obviously, kuna sasa wale...
Ni kama vile wa Masai.
But remember, there are those who came from that side.
Yeah, kuna wale walikuwa refugees. Alafu kuna wale ni familia. Ni kama yule former deputy president wetu. Namkumbuka? Alikuwa anaitwa sio Rigiji. Ule wa Kibaki. Alikuwa anaitwa
the guy who guys everybody was saying had died.
Moody Awori's brother.
Yes.
Unakumbuka ndugu yake alikuwa MP Uganda at the same time. Yeah. So Wasamia pia hata Wajaluo si ni Walangi Langos VTC going into Uganda. Mika.
The thing is, what most people don't realize is that before these borders were drawn by Europeans.
Correct.
Right? And we follow history to Kisamahizo migrations, where we came from and where people lived next to each other. They were not divided mostly by tribe, but the land that was where they lived on, it was divided by the Europeans and to the borders.
Yeah.
Now, among those communities that lived evil, they also intermarried a lot.
Yes.
And that is why you find me, I'm called a Chin and I'm a Luya. It's because
you're called what?
Where I'm from, if I go 30 kilometers, niko Uganda.
Yes.
Ni mtu wa border.
If I go 20 kilometers, niko Nyanza.
Correct.
Unaona? If I go south another 30 kilometers, niko na Wasamia, because the Samias are the next group next to us. Like basically sisi na Wasamia tunaishi pamoja hivi, unaona? If I come up this side naenda kwa Wawanga, where the Wanga kingdom ilikuwa, unaona? Like right now, like basically these are rivers separating these different places of these different sub-tribes. Ethnically we are all the same, si wote ni Waluya. Si wongeta baka Wajaluo huko kwetu usikie Kiluya, na sisi Waluya kwetu usikie Kijaluo. Si usikie Kiganda na tumeona na Waganda. Alafu tuko na Wateso bado hii side nyingine ya juu.
Na Wateso wako pande zote mbili ya border.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wasamia na Wateso.
And then wako side zote mbili za border. Yeah, the same thing. The same ukienda side ya Uganda, Busia Uganda, utapata kuna Waluya wanaishi.
Mimi ni mmoja huko kunaitwa Tororo. Nilienda huko Arusi. It was conducted in Luya, Luo, Kiganda na Kiswahili.
Yep.
Na Kisamia.
Because Tororo is basically like what? It's like 30 minutes from Malaba.
Yeah, from the border. It's not far. And then, by the way, Mika, this dynamic which you're describing was the same in Rwanda. Today, if you go to Rwanda today, I know this. I've been around Rwanda a bit.
We know.
This division between Bahutu and Batutsi, based on those colonial descriptions, by the way, does not exist. Yep. If someone who was like my in my family, let me just say in my larger family, if I was to go with those classifications, me and my daughter will not even be classified the same. By the way, she's been here. I think you've seen her. She has a bit of her mom's characteristics, but she has my grandfather's skin color. So if she was in Rwanda, she'd be classified one thing. Her mother would be classified another thing. Me, I'd be classified another thing. So those classifications, and then over and above that, there was a lot of intermarriage between these so-called historic ethnic groups which were different. Bahutu and Batutsi, there is no family in Rwanda today, including even the president's family, who cannot claim from both sides. It is not true that they are tall. It is not true that they are short. It's not true that they are brown. It's not true. These are the same ethnic group, just different
now
clans and features.
Explain to us the conflict.
Okay, so now we have the historical context is
so
there are all these ethnic communities.
Because so what's going on? And
the first Congo War came out of that tension between Interahamwe crossing over the border and the Rwandan government, because the Rwandan government was saying these are the people who killed our people, and you're talking about 1 million people being slaughtered. And then the Congolese government did not give them the leeway to pursue these perpetrators of genocide. If anything, I don't think it was intentional per se as government policy, but there was an acceptance of the community who integrated. So the Rwandan government sends in forces into Congo, and obviously it caused a war. First Congo War, Second Congo War. Then obviously once that happened, the ethnic animosity grew even more against now ethnic Tutsis on the Congo side, right? The Banyamulenge, so-called. That ethnic animosity, which was already there, it had already been planted during colonial period. It had grown, and now the mothership or the mother kingdom is attacking us in our own homeland from the perspective of the Congolese. So the ethnic animosity grew. When the war ended, that animosity now became attacks against ethnic Tutsis in South and North Kivu. So again, you had a refugee problem. Then there was a second war over the same issue. And then obviously now interest started kicking in, because it happens that North Kivu and South Kivu have the largest deposits globally, especially as this mobile technology has grown. Anything you hold and put in your pocket. I have my phone, my internet thing, my computers, now electric cars. One of the main components is rare. There are quite a number of rare earth minerals that are important, but you have copper for the wires, you have cobalt, tantalum. Those three minerals are what build all the technology we use here. So obviously a lot of money started coming in from foreign actors who want this resource. King of whom is this company called Apple. In fact, there are lawsuits against Apple computers because of how these minerals are mined. So it also now became a fight over resources. I heard this from an authoritative source that another reason the conflict has continued to spiral is actually now a conflict over land, and not necessarily owning or titling the land or conquering the territory, but establishing control over the local economy in South and North Kivu, because you need that land for production of food. Then underlying all that is now the ethnic dynamics. So there was the first Congo War, second Congo War over all these things. Then in 2012, it culminated in a peace deal. The local Banyamulenge community had obviously formed militias who had this peace deal with the Congolese government, where they said, okay, for us to be reintegrated into this society peacefully, we're going to put down our arms, we'll go back to our communities. Those who are in the ranks will be integrated into the Congolese army. People will be given positions in government, and will live happily ever after. So it was supposed to hold. Then over time, those agreements were violated. March 23rd, 2012 was when that thing was signed. That peace accord was signed between the Banyamulenge militias.
What was the violation?
So the peace deal was on the basis of space in government. It's like our serikali ya Sumukati.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
so the North and South Kivu communities, being predominantly the Banyamulenge, had a peace deal with the government, saying.
And this one is in DRC.
This is now the the government in Kinshasa.
In Kinshasa.
Yeah, by the way, this is not uncommon.
To
right?
provide context, so that we know
in
that
Congo. Yeah. So
yes.
an example which I think will be relevant. I wish Nani was here, would have given us very good. If Ali was here, would have given us a very good background on that. So the only way the coast of Kenya was integrated as part of our country
was an agreement.
There was a peace treaty between the British
Sultan
and the Sultan. So the terms of that treaty have held for now over 70, almost 100 years, right? So we agreed that we would integrate the Swahili as Kenyans, but more importantly, that would protect their religious rights, right? To practice Sharia law. That's why we have Qadis courts and all these other Islamic institutions. So there were some terms that were supposed to be adhered to in that treaty. One of which was mining contracts, which obviously would resolve the issue of these conflicts. Another one of which was trade. The borders would be kept open. There's a border in Goma. Those two cities, Goma and Bukavu, are right at the border with Rwanda and further down.
And apparently this Goma is actually closer to Nairobi than it is one of those upper
Goma is 100 kilometers from Kigali. It's very close to the border, right? So you have Goma. So the borders, there was issues around the borders. There was issues about attacks, dealing with these militias. But the predominant ones were integration into the army, etc. Then that was supposed to solve all these issues. But what has happened since then, subsequent governments, starting with Kabila, who violated the terms, and in fact, Museveni and Kagame intervened and kicked out his government in what you term as a regional coup.
Uyu Kabila, the dancer?
No.
Kabila, Joseph Kabila.
Laurent. Yeah, Joseph Kabila. Yeah, he was kicked out. And then M23 regrouped. They have been regrouping slowly. And this time, they have not just come as a rebel force. They have also come with a political arm and with significant support from Kigali. Allegedly. Everybody is denying it. But tell us something we don't know. So that's the roots of the conflict. What happened over the last couple of weeks was they started marching south. Started with Goma, overrun. And what I know about my in-laws.
So before you go there, before you advance, quickly. So, because what we have seen is that we know that what has been projected has been some rebel group M23 going around, and it's like they have been advancing. They've been attacking, but they've been making advances. Burning embassies. We know that we know that they burnt the Kenyan embassy. We know that they burnt, I think, the Rwandan embassy.
Yeah.
They burnt embassies. That is one. But so there was this notion that South Africa was supposed to... There was something about troops, but South Africa was, I think, accusing Rwanda of having M23 and them, whatever. Maybe you can address that, because there's a lot of stuff that...
So what has happened? So as M23 started to advance their attack, and actually throughout this period, since since one of the issues that was raised during the March 23 Accords, this peace deal, was they would have peacekeepers, MONUSCO, and they've been sitting there for the last 20 years, keeping the peace so that this rebel group does not attack the other rebel group across the road. That's what these guys have been doing for all this time. So peacekeepers have been sitting there all this time. When more recently, when M23 started to regroup and fight, this was about 2 years ago. The warring parties, M23, and the interested parties like Rwanda and Uganda agreed that Kenyan forces would be sent in to North and South Kivu as a neutral, not arbiter, but a peacekeeping force. Peacekeeping typically is just standing between the two warring forces to prevent them from fighting. Become a referee. Mwacheni kupigana. You see, so they try and keep the peace by disarmament. That was part of the peace agreement, but it was not kept. So the Kenyan forces come in, but apparently this guy called Tshisekedi had a different agenda. He thought
Tshisekedi is
the president of Congo.
Okay.
This guy has a different agenda. He wants to overrun M20. Obviously, I mean, this is his sphere of influence.
Yes.
And they all also want control of these mines, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously, you're being influenced by, it's even reported, those people who are being paraded off like school children, the whites, the Romanians, so-called Romanians.
Yeah.
Apparently, that was the Wagner group. Some mercenaries are, some of them Russian, but they said Romanians to kind of cover it up. On top of that, you have mercenaries from other parts of Africa all operating there. So Tshisekedi now sets up, and the roots of this conflict is that Tshisekedi, instead of abiding by the accord, he recruits mercenaries, and even worse, he recruits in Rahamwe, who are in the minds of any Rwandan of Tutsi descent, in the minds of any Congolese of Tutsi descent, anyone. Yeah. These are people who are an existential threat. Yeah, and then they've also been attacks. These people have been bombing across the border, killing people, attacking villages. Then the Congolese government, instead of, over and above to aggravate the situation even more, they recruit them into the ranks. At that stage, I think the rubric was crossed. The decisions in Kigali were that these people, they want to finish us, as far as we are concerned. So then that's why you're hearing this kind of rhetoric. Just yesterday, President Kagame was saying, between you threatening me with aid and you threatening my life, what do you think I'm going to do? So to the Rwandan people, this Interahamwe group, this former genocidaires, are an existential threat, right? And now the Congolese government is in bed with them. So of course that it hits a nerve. So now you have what is happening. Then Tshisekedi kicks out the Kenyans because them they are not shooting, they are just enforcing the peace. He kicks us out. There is this Uhuru group. There were various processes. They tried it in Luanda, the Luanda process.
Mukwende, in other words.
Yeah, they tried the Nairobi process because the forces were supposed to keep the peace while the political processes are going on. So that watu wakubaliane alafu sasa ukitoka hapo watu wanaishi vizuri. Then Tshisekedi decides, Kenyans, tokeni hapa. You are not serving my interests. And Congo happens to be part of the SADC. And they have this mutual military pact. If you attack one of us, you've attacked all of us. So SADC also now sends a force, but this is not a peacekeeping force. Apparently, their mandate is different. It's peace enforcement.
Unasema ni kama,
in other words,
ni kama GSU. Fanya fujo
uone. So a fight breaks out. So you have one group, you have peace enforcers, you have mercenaries, genocidaires, and the Congo government, Congo army on one side. The other side, you have M23 and associated rebel groups with the backing of the Rwandan Defense Force. Allegedly. Don't know. Still saying allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
No, it's good to use the word allegedly because we don't want trouble. No, it's allegedly.
Nitafutwe baadaye.
Unajua huyu jamaa kuna vitazi sema.
There are fights.
Hata lala home.
There are fights which now break off. The fight now spills over a month ago. You have one group of people, mercenaries are there as soldiers of fortune. Genocidaires are there because they hate the Tutsis. The Congolese are there because they want the minerals and they want to kick out these people from the land where they sit. Then you have the M23, basically the Tutsi community, who are they are fighting for their existence.
Yeah.
Who do you think will win that fight?
Let me thank you for at least.
So that's the background, and then in the crossfire, these SADC people started shooting, and 14 of them were killed, were sent back home.
I think it's good to provide context and to educate, because let me tell you, and I think we spoke about this last week. There's so much we don't know because we are not taught, and we go by what we see, and sometimes media, depending on the lens through which you view it,
Yes.
it could be very skewed.
Yes.
Get. So sometimes it's good to and that is why we always complain about not having, not being able, or not being in a. We are in a position to, but never tell our stories. Like for example, Kenyan media, we're in a position to, but we never tell our stories truthfully. We have to wait for independent journalists like these guys of Africa,
CNN,
those ones like John Alanamu's joint, African Independent something, to educate, and then now wamekuja unatufunza, and this is also let me segue into this, but I'm segueing because it also hits home, but Ali is not here because he is a vital, and we had this show about, last week talking about the vetting, and trying to understand about the vetting of IDs and what people go through. And it is something that many of us did not know, that Kenyans
of Somali
descent, Kenyans, the vetting that they go through is ridiculous, but we would never understand or know because we've never gone through it.
Correct.
And pilipili tusioila haiwezi kutuasha. Unaget? Before we continue, some few comments over here. Let's see. Over here, Resilience says, Dr. Wangusi, I am from the West Coast. Angie is from the South. That has never stopped anything from happening. That's all I'm going to say.
As we are just saying, they're the same person.
Exactly. So Angie says, resentment fanned by the leaders who sow seeds of division is what led to the Rwandan genocide. And I think that one was started out. I don't know.
Yes.
Angie continues to say, division should be avoided at all costs. Stefan Jagani. Yes, Mudiawori's bro had a bro MP in Uganda supporting yours. Maybe if I just go 10 minutes, niko Uganda. Stephen, uko wapi huko? Nyadorera.
Maybe
that is Kerea. Maybe knows that. Maybe Mika knows that.
Maybe Mika can tell us.
Nyadorera, Mika?
Mika will use a fair.
He
can use a fair.
Nyadorera.
In Nyadorera.
Not even fair. Mika can just do anafu inafika huko ndani. Angie says, Dr. Wangusi said it. The differences are man-made.
Man-made, yes.
Which is true.
The border, the border.
They are man-made.
Yes.
Yeah. And continues to say, when people fall into the trap of looking at everything with a tribal racial lens, it leads to serious division, which we still do.
Yes.
Which we still do. Which allows us to segue into, and I'm just gonna, I just want to briefly mention, or we can talk about this because we've got, Baba's election chair, tomorrow, the election. And then to finally finish off, kuna Kendrick Lamar. But the Somali vetting, I think it's still a topic that is very important because there are two sides of the coin. The vetting, there are people who are for it, there are people who are against it. The people who are for it are because it is a tedious process for Kenyans of Somali descent. People who are against it are because of many of the terrorists are Somali, supposedly. Statistics show otherwise. And again, this is where we were talking about, and I think we had this conversation on the sidebar. And do you remember when we were talking about, like now, for example, when we were talking about, when we are listening to Jonathan Mweke, the PS for livestock, and how he broke down the need to vaccinate.
Yes, the animal.
Very simple.
Yeah.
Very simple. But the communication from the government, we've always said, has
very wanting. It leaves you,
bro.
With
even like, wanting. Wanting is an overstatement,
you're like,
bro.
What? What is this?
It is. C.T. Muga said it best. They say, then people are left to interpret.
So and you come to your own conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of these conclusions are so biased because some of the narratives are Wasomali wananunua, Wasomali watakuja, Wasomali wanapewa ID, Wasomali ndio wanapewa security portfolio.
Docket, yes.
Docket. Somali watakuja, Somali watakuwa president. Somali watafanya hivi. And you're like, okay, hold on. Stop the presses. They are Kenyans. Anybody can be president. Nobody is entitled, no tribe is entitled to have a kitty.
Yes.
Anyone can vie for that kitty and get it. What is the problem with that? No. And sometimes the government. So President Ruto's declaration, roadside, just declaring, unfortunately leaves such a wide gap and a wide bath of insinuations. A lot of assumptions. A lot of discussions that mpaka now you are actually having elected officials from Northeastern come in to actually discuss how hard it is to even get an ID. And forget that. People of Somali descent living in Nairobi who have never lived in Northeastern or any of those counties
have to go through the same
have to go back.
They have to go back
to
get vetted.
Yeah, and I
from
think
that side so that they can get an ID in Nairobi.
Yeah, but you have to
briefly, because I know I would have loved for Ali to be here for us to discuss
this was a very important one.
Yeah, because we had this discussion last week, and I don't know if Mika has any input, but I think just briefly.
But let me just tie let me tie out my what we were talking about with respect to like this Great Lakes conflict with what is actually happening in Eastern Africa as well.
Yeah.
So two things. So the first is that dynamic is the same, and we have to look back as to why do Kenyans of other descent, Kenyans of Luo descent, Luo descent, Kalenjin descent, of whom, if we look at that map, some of us spill over to other countries. The Luya are said to come from Eastern Uganda, and it is true because the Samia on both sides. So ethnically,
even
we are spread over. The Maasai, why is it that the Maasai are on both sides of the border, right? If you cross over from Manamanga over to the other side, utawapata Maasai tu wale. Hata Waswahili huyu nani alikuwa anasema wanaenda mpaka huko chini nini? Malawi sijui. When you go to the other side, the Oromo, who are the ruling ethnicity, quote unquote, the president of Ethiopia is Oromo, and they are in Kenya. So what happened with the Somali? How are they different from the rest of us? The truth is that they are not. But something happened in history that changed that perception.
War and all of that.
Yeah, so the shifter war is where that suspicion that you are the other started to
and
come
that's
about.
Another thing.
But the truth is, if you look at Kenya Defense Forces, you look at the security apparatus, even the most visible, when we had the Westgate attack, when we had the 2007 clashes, when we've had the security issues, today, the security apparatus in Kenya, Noor, all these people, these are all Somalis. They're the ones who have protected. In fact, they're the ones who fight hardest in the front lines, not only because they understand the terrain, but also because they have the most to lose. Because they're the ones who are being, Somalis are the ones who are being profiled.
Somali Kenyans.
Kenyans are being profiled adversely in their own country. Right? Yeah. So the law was then written to discriminate against Somali Kenyans.
Yes.
In other words, you have to prove your Kenyanness. It's the same thing that is happening here. Because I'm black, because I'm Latino, of Latino descent, because I'm of Asian descent, I have to prove my Americanness. Right? It's the same dynamic. I think it's the same dynamic. It's the same as what is happening in the Great Lakes region. That because I'm of Tutsi descent, I have to prove that I'm Congolese.
Yes.
Right?
And
so it's not as toxic in Kenya. We are not fighting. But we have to also be careful because you can see what happens.
Because what that means, and what that means is like when it comes to resources, technically the Northeastern is not even a stepchild. It's maybe that child that we don't want, but or an unwanted pregnancy because of the way they are treated, which is bad because you're just abandoned. it makes it hard. Like now you find that somebody got their first ID at 30 years old. 30.
Which means they cannot travel.
They cannot travel.
They don't have
get
the
a
same
passport.
mobility.
They can't career. Yet
Yeah,
there are
because
there are people who are not even Somali Kenyans or whatever. Wako na M-Pesa. Wako na phone number. They have an M-Pesa, wanauza manjugu, whatever. Anyway, and I think that conversation needs to go
and when
on.
by the way, when you look at the geographic spread of the Somali ethnic group, I from what I'm seeing, about 1/5 of Somalis are in Kenya, right? And they cover, if you look at the map again, they cover Garissa and Wajir County, or almost cover most of Marsabit. Garissa and Wajir County, the northern counties cover 70% of Kenya, right? Between Garissa, Turkana, Wajir. So they also even cover a large geographic spread of our country, right? These are Kenyans. They have always been there.
Yeah,
They were not brought. They were not forcefully migrated into Kenya. These are Kenyans, born. But why do they have to prove their Kenyanness any more than I have to?
Before we continue,
Same, if you ask me, it's the same.
I will
dynamic.
echo Eric Latiff's assertion of the no need for vetting. And Eric Latiff said what they need is the vetting that should happen at birth. Mtoto akizaliwa, majina yanachukuliwa. It's a Kenyan hospital. Mtoto amezaliwa. It goes to, there's a database for something, national planning, something, whatever.
Yeah.
Mtoto anachukuliwa. Tuseme Cecil, majina ni Cecil Omoshfire Omera, what is password? Born this. KKK. Inawekwa kwa database. That becomes permanent. Meaning, it doesn't matter where you go. Shule, bado iko. Because it shows you were born pale Mandera, ama Wajir, or
there's truth.
Yeah, it's back to this question of birthright citizenship, right?
There's truth to that, but then
let me finish. Then, when it comes at 18, because the information is already database iko.
Yes.
At 18, I want to get my ID. My name is Cecil Omoshfire. Oh, Cecil Omoshfire.
No, but let me ask a question, because I'm actually a bit ignorant on this topic. So let me ask this question.
No, we don't know much before we move to the next topic. But
so I remember when I went to get my ID, I think I went with my birth certificate, if I'm not wrong.
And your father or mother?
My father and my mother's
yes.
ID.
Yes.
Right?
That is a requirement.
Yeah, that is a requirement. So what additional vetting?
Living certificate, unaenda na nini, because you're already 18.
Yeah, but now,
a lot of times umemaliza.
So what is the additional requirement that they are talking about?
Them.
Somalia.
Somalia. Sasa wanakuja na idea nyanya na babu.
Yes.
Yes. Because you're now proving that your lineage Kenyan, not you. Your lineage.
No, but that's not by law. But because Kenyan law, if you look at Kenyan, our immigration law says,
bro,
two things. If you are born in Kenya, Kenyan airspace, you're Kenyan. Whether you are born,
okay, so
hata kama mzazi wako alikuwa nini ama nini, ukizaliwa Kenya,
bro, on paper,
on paper.
And then the other thing, let me tell you, the other thing it says,
paper.
which is also really interesting. Nilikuwa pale immigration, kuna mtu aliwahi niambia hii story. If a child is found who is of assumed age under the age of 8,
they are Kenyan.
They just assume
they are Kenyan.
Yani ukipatikana tu mtoto nini anazurura mahali na hana mzazi na uko chini ya hizo miaka, you are assumed to be Kenyan. Okay, correct. So that's how you get citizenship by birth. Yes. So why do now Somalis have to prove if you are,
and that's
that's the part
that's where the
part that was being removed. But remember, it stems back, the history of it stems back to the whole shifter wars, all of
and
that.
It's something, and it's a history that we need to know.
Then people also supposedly the Somalis or people of Somali descent who are from outside or not descent, or
they are falsifying.
So outside Somalis coming in, paying to get papers and so on and so forth. So there was some sort of how do I put it? People collaborated internally. So to avoid all of those so-called things, they added those extra steps.
No, but that is happening. But if you ask me, that would be also, I know families. In fact, I know individuals. Some of my friends who I call by name. That, in fact, I have two good friends who I know. Their parents are from Uganda. Some,
Yes.
the ethnic groups at the border.
Yes.
In fact, mmoja ni Mjaluo. By the way, Mjaluo from Tanzania.
Shiraki.
Baba alivuka mpaka
Yes.
na kuwazalia Kenya
Yes.
ndivyo wapate makaratasi.
Yes.
The same things that are happening here. And then
Correct.
you also have that dynamic
Correct.
where people marry.
But
And
my
then-
friend,
Yes.
Because
Pale-
without birthright, then Kenya has another dynamic.
Northeast- Northeastern border, that's a different story.
Yeah, because
Lakini border ya Northeastern sio refu kuliko hizi
It doesn't
zingine.
no,
matter.
but the whole point of it is
It
that
doesn't
kuna
matter.
Msomali
It is
anakuja
that.
kutoka Somali.
Yes,
anaingia
whatever the
Kenya,
narrative is.
na then now anachukua citizenship.
Wanasema analipa.
Yes, either that or they're proving
You
or
see,
whatever.
that's
Whatever
the
the case is.
that's the
And
narrative.
The narrative.
That's the
That's the
narrative.
narrative.
No, and then there's
Wanalipa.
there's also another
There's
issue.
a narrative over there that
There's
these guys
also
are-
another
they're coming back and forth and you can't prove who's who.
There's another issue. There's actually another issue that's in on both sides of the border, but then it's more significant on the Somali side of the border. So you have two very large refugee camps. The difference is the refugee camp Kakuma has predominantly ethnic communities from South Sudan. So those ones are known. Those are not Kenyan ethnic communities. On the Somali side, you have what is it called? What is that refugee camp called? Dadaab.
Yes.
Kakuma on one side, that one you can control. But by the way, I grew up in Eldoret. If you go to Kapsoya today, if you go to Lavington, by the way, go to Junction Mall, the dominant ethnic group there is now South Sudanese, right?
Yeah.
I even hear the South Sudanese, the most busy flight from Nairobi, anywhere in the world is to Juba. Every hour they are flying in and out. So have breakfast with your family in Kenya, dinner with your family in Juba. But the point is, I guess based on what seem like legitimate reasons, but also this sort of underlying
there's a lot
discrimination.
There's
right?
a lot of it, and also the vetting, the extra vetting. Other than this one, which is really, to me, I think I would venture to say it's a special case with the Somalis, and that is why you see that they're now trying to go away from it or move away from it, because it is actually discriminatory. I get part of what they were trying to do. There was good behind what they were trying to do, but they didn't do it the correct way, if you ask me. Okay.
Maybe.
Now,
Maybe.
border communities tend to have these sorts of vetting. Their vetting is different from a chap who's living in Nai, for lack of a better word. Now, if you happen to be the guy who's living in Nai, na umesema weni mtu wa kutoka that border community, guess what happens? Unarudi back to the border community.
Uende uvetu huko na watu wanakujua.
Yes, you chief huko ndio anakujua. Si chief wa Kibira, ama chief wa Makadara.
Okay, let me throw a spanner in the works. So it seems like a good thing, but now the timing. This is why now it has raised a furor. Because it's being done for political reasons.
Yes,
Kuna huyu jamaa amepoteza kura za Central Kenya.
We're not denying.
Kuna hiyo timing.
Yeah,
We're not denying
there's that timing, but also, in as much as that timing, but then also I think it gives an opening to have a serious discussion on the neglect of our brothers and sisters, what we go through, because like you said, kuna watu wengi walienda they applied, they got their father ID, their birth certificate, and they got ID. There are guys who got their IDs when they're 30 and Somalis. But anyway,
some people still don't have it
yes,
because they can't get it.
Yeah, they can't get it.
You can't go get nyanya na babu.
Yes. But anyway, that we'll continue with that.
We can't.
And then, last question.
No.
Hii ni swali ya mwisho kabisa on this topic. Let's just say 2%, 3% fall through the cracks. And they are Somalis from Somalia or Somaliland or from Ethiopia.
Yes.
And they make it across the border. Shida iko wapi? Because hata sana hawa ni watu wako na pesa, wanakuja wanamwaga pesa Kenya.
Now here is
hata nini South Sudanese, the ones you find in loving, these are people who are investing in our country. So
some of those jokers are not investing in it. They're investing.
Mtaanza kusema ati
we have seen what
mtaanza kusema wamekuja kuchukua mali zetu.
I'm just talking about
wamekuja hapa kupanga sijui terrorism.
No. 1 minute.
South Sudanese wamefanya nini? Hakuna kitu South Sudanese wamefanya.
Okay.
They have just invested in our country.
If you can't answer in 1 minute, I'm gonna kill this.
Okay, so
umesema wameshoot nani?
No. I just in your regular day to day, a lot of them actually posture, carry guns, do all sorts of different things. And I'm just telling you,
Who?
The same South Sudanese guys.
They have guns on them. But you can own a gun in Kenya. It's not a.
But sasa now owning a gun and then using it, that's a different thing. And then being protected. There are some who are.
But if you attack, how does he end up shooting you? It's not like they are going to rob you.
Okay. I don't know how we can have this thing.
Okay. Let me listen.
Let me move on to the Somalis. The Somalis part of it, and that's the myth, is that these are the same people who are terrorists and. They're the ones who are doing all these sorts of things, and history has shown this and blah blah blah. And I think that is very far from the truth. But that's where the hidden is it the veil that's hidden? That's how they are justifying a lot of these things. And it goes back again to shifter time. When people were crossing over and shifting back and forth, and then killing or running this side, then they kill, then they come this side, they kill, and that's where all of these things stem
suspicion
from.
Yeah.
And then over time,
no, but in some means, I think in some means this is one of those cases where they throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Correct.
Because there are actual cases where maybe there's a Somali from a particular clan, he was sheltered, and then now the government says deal with all of them the same way, right? Yes. Which is not fair.
And remember, during Uhuru's time, what happened? Once these people rounded up and put in stadiums, I mean, so if you look
that
at
kind
it,
of nativist,
it is so sad, and it is so.
It shouldn't be the case.